Good evening. Welcome to Left, Right and Centre. I'm Vishnu Shom. On the program tonight, Budget 2021, what India needs. It's a huge day tomorrow. Can we realistically expect proper all-inclusive growth? On the show tonight, Vikram Kirloskar, Naina Lal Kidwai, Dr. Niranjan Hiranandani and Professor Jayati Ghosh. It's a great panel we have tonight. Meanwhile, some related news just coming in. GST revenues during January this year are at their highest since the introduction of GST and have touched almost 1.2 lakh crores, exceeding last month's record collection of 1.15 lakh crores. These are seen to be indicators of a rapid economic recovery as India looks to get out of the pandemic. But quite clearly, there is a long way ahead. Well, let me go straight across to my panel, just to repeat them. Vikram Kirloskar, Naina Lal Kidwai, Dr. Niranjan Hiranandani and Professor Jayati Ghosh. Thank you all very much for being with us. Naina Lal Kidwai, let me come to you first, ma'am. Now, according to recent estimates, the centre's fiscal deficit is expected to widen to 7 to 8% of GDP in 2020-2021. That's nearly 2.5 times the budget target which had been set, which was 3.5%. So how important is it to look at deficit management, not necessarily from a short-term perspective, but from, say, a longer 3-year perspective?
I believe it is critical to look at the deficit from a medium-term perspective, because this is not the year to begin to look at fiscal responsibility in terms of adhering to a target which is clearly unachievable, and at a time where we need to focus on consumption and on investment and making sure that the economy, which is kicking back to life, continues down this trajectory. So we need to buy time, and the way to do it is to set a target which is realistic, which the markets and which regulators and credit rating agencies buy into, and commit to adhering to that target and also demonstrate how we might do it. We do know that we can raise funds through divestments. There's a lot of real estate, things that we can raise money from, but we cannot do tomorrow. Committing to do this would ensure that we can bring the fisc back into line over time.
Okay. Professor Ghosh, now some say that the 11% GDP growth prediction for the next, in the next couple of quarters coming up, in the economic survey is also misleading. Why? Because it comes from a low base of minus 7.7% this year. It would really translate into a GDP growth rate of something considerably lower than what, when people look at that 11% number, they think it's going to be very great. Is this a case of a glass half empty or a glass half full in terms of the fact is we are coming out of the pandemic. There are shoots which have emerged. The GST numbers are positive, and we have this 11% number as well. Is it realistic?
I really wouldn't bother with the 11% number. I think that right now, the most important thing is for the government to spend. We are facing a huge crisis of demand. There's a massive decline in employment and livelihoods. Real wages are down. People are suffering. There's enormous hunger. It is absolutely critical for the government to spend more. And to look at it as a share of GDP is completely meaningless when GDP is falling. So These ideas of fiscal deficit to GDP ratio make no sense at all in a period of contraction. Across the world, you have governments that are spending more by just borrowing from the central bank. Across the world, not just advanced economies, but the other BRICS countries as well. Everybody is borrowing more and spending because that's the only way to bring the economy out. And to look at just a few indicators of the formal economy and say that everything's fine and we don't have to worry, I think that is very misleading and it's dangerous. The government right now must put much more public spending into the social sectors, into employment-intensive activities, and in infrastructure that will reduce supply constraints.
Okay. Dr. Hiranandani, the MSME sector, now has the government delivered significant income support to business establishments and livelihoods which have been hit so hard? This is something, we've had a couple of big announcements by the government, but has anything by way of deliverables actually achieved what it was supposed to do? Because according to so many reports, the third quarter of fiscal 2020-2021 is anticipated to finish with job numbers at 395 million, which is a 2.5% drop. from the corresponding quarter of the previous year. So MSME, such a critical part of our economy, what more needs to be done?
Okay, as president of ASSOCHAM that I've been, we did an assessment somewhere in January to find out about what was happening with about 4.5 lakh MSMEs, segments that we have direct and indirect membership of. And we found that almost 50% was still in crisis. So while I would say that half of them have really been able to spring back, a large number of them catering to the informal sector have still been in difficulties. And then there are small ones catering to hospitality, catering to those segments of the economy, tourism, travel, hotels and other things, directly or indirectly supplying these areas. In those segments, the MSMEs are struggling in a terrible manner. But before I conclude this, I must say that the issue of spending under the economy in the budget, really deficit financing cannot be taken into consideration. I concur with the other panel members. And if we don't do this investment, then the question of 10% growth or 11% growth, even on a lower base, will not happen. So both in the public sector and the private sector, we need to incentivize investments. We need to get this done. MSMEs, of course, are suffering in a much, much larger way. And the credit availability to them is not there from the banks simply because the demand is not there. So what they really need to do is to push demand in a much more stronger manner. And in segments like housing and urban infrastructure, where employment becomes a very big factor, 15% of all employment in the country is today in the housing and infrastructure sector.
Yes.
So boosting these and MSMEs, you can actually put 50% of the people unemployed who have gone out of employment or are unemployed back onto track. I think these are very important issues that we really need to address in the budget. So spend, 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 and incentivize private sector to invest and spend.
Mr. Kirloskar, a related question now. The economic loss due to COVID is estimated to be up to 20 lakh crores, 9 to 10% of the GDP this fiscal compared to the previous year. How important, in your opinion, is it for the government to intervene aggressively on an urgent basis and incur substantial expenditure to lift the economy? And if you look at sectors which you have worked with very closely, the auto sector, I mean, you have interest in the infrastructure sector as well. How should a lot of this actually be, for example, towards the infrastructure sector?
No, I agree with all the other speakers. Basically, we have to spend more. But when I just look back, there's a good time to reflect what has happened in the last few 8-10 months. And, we went through a horrible, very difficult time. And everyone said India will be a disaster story, number of deaths will be high, but somehow we have made it through. We have made it through. We've got COVID generally under control. India is to be known as a country with a huge IT industry. IT was our big name. Right now, pharma is becoming a big name as well. And I think we have to get manufacturing and the other sectors also as a big name as we go ahead. There are two things. There's one very important thing to my mind, which I think is critical as we go ahead. We have to create jobs. I think the other speakers said the same thing in different ways, but for me, jobs is the most important thing as we go ahead. And jobs can get created I'm not an economist, in my own simplistic idea is that through consumerism and through infrastructure spending, huge amount of infrastructure spending and consumerism at the highest level. That's on the demand side. And I think both these require a lot of spending. And on the supply side as well, I think it's equally important that we can't sell a product to our consumers. I'm not talking of cars, but I'm talking maybe simple things like a nail cutter also, or any other household goods, at a price which is not a world-class price and quality.
Right.
We can't be double the price of something from China. We have to get our economy to a low-cost economy, and that's the only thing that I believe will move consumerism and also increase jobs. It's like a chicken or an egg first. This is one thing. Second thing on the budget, I hope there are no surprises coming up. I hope there's stability in the policies that go along. People keep talking about protectionism and Atmanirbhar. To me, Atmanirbhar means self-confidence, that we can self-confidently produce competitive products. And that's what we should focus on. We can do it. I've seen Indian companies are able to be very competitive, but I think we need to get a level playing field to ensure they're very competitive.
Okay. Nainalal Kidwai, disinvestment targets, another obvious concern. We keep talking about it this time of the year, every single year. Now, the union budget in the current year had targeted 2.1 lakh crores for disinvestment. Against this, the government has so far affected stake sales to the extent of less than 6,000 crores, less than 5,700 crores in fact. So how important is it for the government to meet its disinvestment targets, not just of loss-making PSUs, but also profitable PSUs, to actually be in a position to fund all of what we are talking about?
So Vishnu, the good news is that we have all these wonderful jewels that we can actually use at times like that. And you're right to point out that the last budget had a very ambitious target, and I have even then said it looked very ambitious, and if we achieved it, we'd be doing very, very well. I do think the markets are right now in terms of the equity markets, so maybe it's just as well we didn't disinvest in the capital markets. The likelihood of getting good valuations now are that much better. And the strategic stake sales of what I think are very difficult sales, Air India in particular, are well on target by the sound. I do think that we need to close some of these deals, make sure that it comes in, not only for the funds that it brings, but also for the headache, the cost and money that government otherwise have to use into these companies. And in this restructuring, we also need to look at the public.
Okay. We've just got a little bit of a sound problem with you. We'll come back to you, Ms. Kidwai, in a moment. My next question back to Professor Ghosh. Non-performing assets, high NPAs, it's a constant struggle in our economy, different parts of our economy, affecting the credit cycle. COVID is expected to have exacerbated the NPA problem. It's at so many levels, from the level of somebody who's been unable to pay off small private loans, consumer loans, to the larger issues of large corporations which have failed and are significant non-performing assets. So as we look at sustaining growth, how important is it for us to look at the constant problem of non-performing assets affecting our credit cycle?
Well, it's not a constant problem. It's an increasing problem. And it's because we have actually ignored it for a long time and not addressed it adequately that it has been growing. If you kick the can down the road, the can grows in size and becomes worse. Similarly, right now, because of COVID, across the world, there are really problems of growing bad loans. So yes, something has to be done. Restructuring has to be done. It has to be done in a feasible way. But I really would emphasize that we always think only of the large corporates when we think of credit, bad loans, supply side, and anything. Whereas, as was already mentioned by Mr. Hiranandani, the small and medium enterprises are absolutely crucial, not just in employment generation, but in keeping our manufacturing and our services going. So even in the issue of bad loans and of dealing with the non-performing assets, we must consider primarily the small and medium enterprises first and give them feasible options of restructuring. I just want to make one point about disinvestment though, I fail to understand why people miss the fact that profitable enterprises bring revenues into the government. Why do you want to sell them? If you feel the government is not equipped, is not doing a right job, you must make the case for it that way. But to say that we need the money and therefore we're going to sell them makes no sense at all, because these profitable enterprises are bringing you revenues. You're handing over assets that will bring you revenues and actually giving yourself a worse situation next time. So you have to weigh that against your borrowing costs. That even on a purely logical level, forget the ideology of public and private and so on. It doesn't make sense to sell something that is bringing you revenues unless you have some other very good reason for it. So please, let's think of disinvestment.
No, so that's an important
not
point.
in purely logic. Let's not think of it in purely ideological terms. That anything state-held has to be sold. That's
Right.
ridiculous.
Right.
You know.
Dr. Hiranandani, would you like to respond to that?
Profits.
Professor
Yeah.
Ghosh makes an interesting point. I mean, you've got loss-making enterprises like Air India, for example, which the government has perhaps rightly wanted to or needs to sell off. But there are other entities, profit-making entities, which a lot of people say should also, for example, be hived off. Professor Ghosh suggests that that should not be the case. How would you respond?
My response is very simple, that in the case of enterprises, you must be competitive. And for example, let's take the case of banks. Today, you take HDFC Bank and other banks, the valuation of it is almost 80% of that of State Bank of India, and at some points of time, even larger. So why would you not encourage more of, let's say, NBFCs like Tata Capital, other large Bajaj Capital and others, which are NBFCs, to become banks, so that you actually increase the spread of it, so that it can cater to various sectors, what Professor Ghosh talked about. I agree with her, you don't have to sell them. But if they are not working efficiently and not creating a valuation, and in fact, government is required to put in money into those, then they should be sold off straight away. That's why the bad one. But the good ones, we need to create and make them competitive. And the reason of selling is the stake means it's not 100% sale of that, but to make them accountable larger than what they are today. So 2 points, yes, not necessary to sell all public sector units, but we have to make them competitive and efficient. But you need, for example, 10 new private banks to cater for the market, cater for every segment of the market, and that is extremely important to do it. The second part of it, while I am very grateful to Professor Ghosh for talking about MSMEs, there is a need for an infrastructure bank on the other end of the spectrum. And that is catering. In the last 10 years, we have no infrastructure bank. So all these banks like State Bank and other banks are now catering with short-term funds into long-term investment projects, which are actually not working. So we really need to take care and create at least 1 or 2 infrastructure banks, which could be jointly with the government initiative and also private sector lending in order to do it, because we are just short of credit for infrastructure projects in the private sector. And I think that is also going to be extremely important. And I'll repeat and reiterate that those sectors which are employment generated, we are not giving adequate incentives into those sectors. We have to do those incentives must come about in a very transparent manner and a rationalization of taxes. How can you have big corporates come at 25% and small MSMEs, which are sole proprietors and others, will have to pay 40% rate of tax? I think that's stupid. I mean, somewhere down the line, you need to relook at all these scenes in order to make it happen. And rationalization should take place so that the small sectors don't look at the big companies and say, oh, they get all the benefits in terms of rationalization of taxes, and we pay higher taxes because we are partnerships or individuals or sole proprietorship. That's not workable.
All right. Ms. Kidwai, as a percentage of GDP over the last several budgets, our defense budget has been shrinking. It's been the lowest since the 62 war now for the last several budgets. As a percentage, I believe it's been going even lower. We face a very constant threat. It affects every aspect of life in this country, certainly our economy as well. Do you realistically expect this to be a real priority? We keep talking about Atmanirbhar Bharat. In the defense sector, it's a huge spinner of jobs, potentially. Do you believe there needs to be greater consolidation of this sector through financial outlay?
There is no doubt that the defense sector will provide a huge opportunity for us. Vishnu, are you hearing me clearly?
Perfectly now. Perfectly now. Yeah, perfectly.
Okay. So the issue really is, can we use the defense sector to grow the competitiveness of the defense sector so that we can export and we can use these products for job creation in the local economy? But this is not going to happen overnight. So any investment we do in the sector today, and we have started the process, we started getting our big companies interested in the sector, is not going to necessarily give us benefits in this year or two. I think the focus right now has to be about the near-term successes that come from spending and investment, even as we look to grow our defense capability. So I fear we may have to import and buy and invest, even as we look at the Atmanirbhar plan. And I just want to come in, Vishnu, on this whole issue of disinvestment and the public sector banks. You well know that we have a mountain of bad debt that is piling up. The Reserve Bank of India has said it in its report. The fear that we will see NPAs at 13.5%, and indeed the public sector banks at 16.5%, even as the moratoriums, etc., which the economic survey has referred to, begin to be removed. This requires money and recapitalization of banks.
Yep.
So we already have undercapitalized public sector banks. Then we've got the NPA issue, which will require more capital. And 75% of our banking sector is in government hands through these public sector banks, which is amongst the highest in the world. So there is opportunity to bring money in from outside and do that with a view to capitalizing the banks, allowing government holdings to dilute, maybe down to 26%. So and I think beyond just capital markets, what maybe has not been mentioned, but there's a lot of real estate that is held by government, and that is quite and a lot easier to develop and sell maybe than some of these restructurings that are required of the Air Indias of the world. So let us look at all of these ways, and we need to indicate what it is that we will do in order to show that in the next 2 to 3 years, the fisc will be under control again, even while we pump money into the markets today.
Yeah, yeah.
But solving for the NPAs is going to be a very big and important action for us.
Professor Ghosh, you had a point to make before I go to Mr. Kirloskar. Go ahead, Professor Ghosh.
Yes, just a small point on this. Why do we need foreign money to recapitalize domestic banks? We don't have a foreign exchange constraint. We have a current account surplus at the moment. Our reserves have gone up by another 200 billion in the last few months. Why do we need to have foreign money to recapitalize domestic banks? Nobody else in the world does this. And absolutely, we need development banks. I completely agree with Mr. Hiranandani. These development banks necessarily have to be public. There is no development bank in the world that is purely private. And all the successful economies, beginning with China, but you go across the entire range,
right,
all of them have had public development banks. Our problem is we got rid of them in the 1990s. We really must have them again.
Mr. Kirloskar, I'm running out of time. We haven't discussed the elephant in the room, the healthcare sector, COVID, the fact that even now going forward, there has to be an incredibly large allocation just in terms of continuing with, getting vaccines across to as many citizens as possible. If the private sector isn't involved, one hopes that it will be at some stage. And then general healthcare, as a percentage of our GDP. If there is ever a year in which we need to have learnt a lesson, it's the last 12 months. Do you believe that this is something that we need to look at in a much more concrete fashion than we've done?
Yeah, I think everyone in the healthcare industry, all my friends, some of them who are not here today, they've all said the healthcare is most essential now as we go ahead, and the spending is required to be much more in hospitals and in everything else. And we know this is an industry which is competitive in the world for us as well. So I think it's not a place where if we put in money, it's going down anywhere else. It's of course taking care of health. But it's also money which will make a very productive industry sector as we go ahead. No question about that. Putting money on healthcare.
Professor Ghosh, last word to you. Manrega and the allocation for Manrega, it's what, 1 lakh crores at the moment. Do you believe that needs to be maintained, or does that need to grow as well?
No, it has to grow. But let us please remind ourselves that an allocation cannot determine the total spending on Manrega. The law requires the money to be made available where there is demand. The government has continuously actually abrogated that law, has not provided the money. We estimated last year that you need a minimum of 1.2 lakh crore to make it function before the pandemic. Now the situation is much worse. There is also need for an urban employment guarantee. We need much, much more spending on employment guarantee. For rural, the law says you cannot put a budgetary limit. So the idea that we're giving a bigger allocation than before, that is meaningless. The central government must provide the money when there is demand, and there is massive demand, as we know.
All right, I'd like to thank you.
I just want to mention on health.
Yes, Professor.
During the pandemic, there has been hardly any increase on health. The total spending of the government of India on health is 0.3% of the previous year's GDP. The central government spending between April and December on health is 0.3% of the previous year's GDP. This is absolutely appalling. And I think we must be the global leaders of this.
Yeah.
At the bottom of the pile.
But as always, we discuss so many areas which all require a financial allocation. At the end of the day, there is only so much that can be done. It's a question of checks and balances and what the government can manage. Hopefully, they'll get it right. I mean, millions depend on that. I'd like to thank you all very much for being with us. Tomorrow is going to be a huge day here in the country. The budget comes up. We'll be listening in on Nirmala Sitharaman's speech as finance minister. Let's see what that brings about. Time for us to take a short break.